Lutherans? Sometimes people are like, why'd you decide to become a Lutheran? I'm like, well, they're just so good looking. So last week I asked my very own teenagers, my personal teenagers, what they thought I should talk about tonight. And they didn't say, Mom, you should just tell them how cool you are. Unfortunately, they said, Mom, you should just tell them how uncool you were when you were our age. So here we go. My own experience as a teenager is not something that's always been easy for me to talk about. I mean, there's a reason why I covered myself in tattoos. I mean, I didn't have the hardest life, but my pain is not what some of yours is, for sure. But it's just not always been easy for me to tell the truth about that time in my life. I mean, when I was writing my first memoir, I did end up telling my editor about it, about having a disfiguring autoimmune disorder from the ages of 12 to 16 that caused my eyes to bulge out of my face so far that my eyelids couldn't close. I told her about the pain of my adolescence. I told her how I had to live with it until I was 16 because the surgeons couldn't fix it until I stopped growing, and it took me a while to stop growing. I was just confiding in her, and then unhelpfully, I thought, she suggested I write about it, which I absolutely refused to do. But once I'd given her a draft of the entire book for its final editing, she read it, and then she sent it back to me with a note saying, Nadia, read this again and tell me that that isn't an important piece of your story. Why else would you be such an angry teenage kid with a substance abuse problem? Be brave, she said, tell it. And so reluctantly I did. And of all the inelegant things I wrote about myself in that book, publicly admitting to drug use and alcoholism, deceit, sexual indiscretion, misanthropy, pretending to be a hero, the pain and alienation of my youth was the one thing that made me think, if I tell this, I might die. If I show what's under the tattoos, no one again will believe that I'm tough. But the truth is that my daily reality at your age was name-calling and bullying and social isolation because I looked like a freak. Let's just say that if I was a teenager at this gathering, I would not be the kid doing all the arm motions during the songs. I would be the kid who refused to stand up when everyone else was. I'd be the girl who, when the adults say, I'm saved by grace through faith, would respond, I didn't ask to be saved, and what the hell is grace, and I'm not even sure I have faith, so who cares? I'd be the kid who didn't fit, for sure. I'd be the kid who believed so many lies about herself and her value that she heard those lies as truth. I tell you this not to get your pity or to, God forbid, seem relatable, but to say something super specific to you. If your life totally sucks right now, if you struggle with having friends or feeling like an outsider, just know that your current reality is not your ultimate reality. And also, I'll tell you a little secret. All the most interesting and creative adults had a horrible time when they were a teenager. I promise you. Who wants to peak in high school? I didn't even graduate from college till I was 36. All the hard stuff now becomes texture on you for the future, I promise you. Not for nothing, but so that memoir I was talking about was titled Pastrix, and I tell you that because the word pastrix was literally an insult that conservative Christian bloggers used to lob my way. Because they wouldn't use my title, Pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber, because they didn't think girls should be pastors. So as an insult, they called me Pastrix. There are a million reasons I should not be a pastor, but literally being a girl is not one of them. So I took that term of insult and then I used it as the title of my first memoir, and that memoir was a New York Times bestseller. So if you're keeping track at home, girl people tried to make fun of, 1, her haters, 0. What they intended for evil, God intended for good. I wrote books about my pain and about my hope and about my mistakes, and I tried to be brave, and I tried to tell the truth, and that truth helped others, and there's a word for that. There's a word for when our tears turn to joy. There's a word for when our own pain is a balm for those who also hurt. There's a word for when our failings are redeemed into something beautiful, and that word, my Lutheran friends, is grace. I wish someone had told the 15-year-old me what grace was. Because grace isn't some fluffy theological word that sounds good but really means nothing. Grace is the way in which God is like the great heavenly composter, making beautiful things out of total feces. Not only that, but to me, grace is God's source code. It was grace that God even created the world to begin with. I mean, before creation, only God existed, right? So that means God had to scoot over. God wanted to share. Like the kind-faced woman on the subway who takes her handbag onto her lap so there's room for you to sit next to her. She didn't have to do it. That's just who she is. The kind-faced subway lady's nature is she makes room for others. So then, this God created every one of us in the male and female image of God. God shared with us God's own image, something so holy that it could never be harmed, never be taken away, a never aloneness, an origin, a destination, a source code of grace. I was thinking this week that the thing that keeps me so obsessed with grace is the way that grace is related to truth. Because when we trust in grace, we're unafraid of the truth, good or bad. There's no reason to fear. For example, I'm supposed to be a so-called spiritual leader. But the truth is, I have never managed to feel spiritual for any extended period in my life. Not just a joke, I literally put up a tweet at one point that admitted that I get what can only be described as road rage when stuck behind someone walking slowly in a prayer labyrinth. I'm like, look, no one's impressed by how into this you are. Speed up, man. There are people trying to pray behind you. Okay, so that's how hopeless I am. And well, as a person like that, I guess I only really feel connected to people who are also kind of like that. Like it feels good to be inspired by other people, to admire their accomplishments and be dazzled by their virtues. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what I really want is to not feel so alone. And while I might feel inspired by someone who's good, I only feel less alone when someone shares their failures with me, the things they struggle with, the parts of themselves that are like more jagged than smooth. There are many of us out there who know that while so much spirituality and religion and self-help is nothing less than an attempt to like smooth out our rough edges, it just so happens that the jagged edges of our humanity are what actually connect us to God and to one another. Those wounds and failures and misconceptions and mistakes, those are the very things that create enough texture on us that God and our fellow humans have something to grab onto. But it still doesn't make it easy to tell the truth about ourselves. I mean, it's never easy. And the thing that makes it hard is that it's like there's this other version of Nadia in my head. One that's had all her problems removed. That version of Nadia is tidy and organized and selfless, and she's more physically fit than I am, and she never gets angry in prayer labyrinths, and she needs fewer hours of sleep, and for some reason, she can recite whole poems. She's basically nothing like me. And I think if I just try hard enough, I can become more her and less me. It's this burden that we carry of always knowing the difference between like our ideal self and our actual self. The difference between our ideal body and our actual body. Between our ideal friends and our actual friends. Between our ideal hobbies and our actual hobbies. It's like an emotional and spiritual Pinterest board just always mocking us. And you have to know that we come by this little pathology honestly. Our culture colludes in this lie of self-perfection. But if you think about it, no one's ever become their ideal self. It's a moving target. It's a false promise. Your ideal self is a lie. So the bottom line is the reason to be unafraid of being honest and just tell the truth about ourselves and to be our actual selves is your ideal self doesn't exist. The self that God has a relationship to is your actual self. The self God loves is your actual self. And there's a word for this, and that word is grace. God isn't waiting for you to become thinner or more spiritual or better athlete to love you. I think the more distracted we become by our projects of self-improvement, the less we really even experience the love of God because we're too busy trying to earn what's already been freely given to us. So here's the deal. Your ideal self is not real. You are. You and all your inconsistencies and beauty, you and your sinner and saintness, you, God beloved, you are magnificently imperfect. But there's so many lies out there trying to tell us about ourselves. Not for nothing, but there is a reason why in parts of the Hebrew Bible the devil is called Hasatan, which means the accuser. And look, no matter if you believe that the devil's an actual being or just the human forces of evil or the shadow side of our own beings, I don't care, man. It is the voice of the accuser that tells us lies about ourselves and other people. The voice of shame in our heads, that's the accuser. The accusing voice is the voice that continually updates me on the distance between my ideal self and my actual self. The one that repeats harmful things said to me as a child. That voice makes us eat less than we should or more than we should. That voice makes us go to ridiculous lengths to prove it wrong or to prove it right. And sometimes we try and shut that voice up with alcohol or sex or shopping or carbohydrates or perfectionism. The accuser is not the conscience, by the way. My conscience says, you were rude to your coworker, and hopefully I listen to my conscience and I go apologize. What I'm talking about are the crippling messages on repeat in our heads. The things we say most often about ourselves to ourselves. That's something different. That's shame, not a guilty conscience. So know this, my friends. When the accusing voice is on repeat in your head, that is not the voice of God. God's voice is a warm sing-song of a mother to her newborn, the one that says, you are mine. God's voice declares us worthy, and there's a word for having worthiness that is in no way based in our efforts or our accomplishments or some ridiculous idea that we can become an imagined ideal, and that word is grace. I like to think of grace not as when, God is a good enough guy to forgive me for my failings, but when God is a source of wholeness and redemption and healing which makes up for my failings, a source which is more powerful than my failings. Grace is the only place of true rest because every other thing in this bankrupt world is about worthiness. In all fairness, I should warn you that this grace thing isn't all wine and roses, because if you think about it, grace is a double-edged sword, because it pushes me to a place I don't want to go, a place where mercy and forgiveness are true for me, awesome, but are also true for those I can't stand, those who don't deserve it. God's grace is for me and for everyone who's ever hurt me. It's for me and my haters. I don't like that. I resist that. And yet, how could it be true for me if it's not true for them? And so, the salvation of my enemy is so completely wrapped up in my own salvation. This is why grace isn't the central message of most Christian churches, you understand. Because Jesus Christ, lifted up, draws all people to himself, not just the worthy, not just the likely, not just the lovely. All means all, which means with my luck, I'll be seated at the heavenly banquet between Harvey Weinstein and some racist cop. And the two of them will hand me some bread and a glass of wine because I'm pretty sure in heaven I'll be able to safely drink again. And they will say, welcome, sinner, join us. And that breaks my heart, and that makes me uncomfortable. And yet, it's what I really need. I need that kind of mercy and forgiveness more than I need to hold resentments. I need that kind of mercy and forgiveness more than I need to be self-righteous. Because self-righteousness feels good for a minute, but only in the way that, peeing your pants feels warm for a minute, And then it goes cold, and it doesn't smell good. You understand, grace is why we have Christian community. You know that, right? Because we help each other shut the voices up. We tend each other's wounds. We show each other our scars. We see and forgive each other's shortcomings. We let each other cry. We make each other laugh and are absolutely adamant about grace for everyone. We insist on freeing each other from the chains of the accusing voice. And we totally have a secret weapon to break those chains because Jesus of Nazareth was a chain-breaking man. Our Lord went about healing the sick and setting the prisoner free, and everything he saw that caused harm to human beings, he put in its place. He shut up that old accuser. From the first day of his work on earth, he took a spiritual machete to the tangled mess of lies and sickness and systems that harm people, to the forces of evil and domination and the powers and principalities in this world that sought to destroy the well-being of God's children. Which is why my favorite part of the baptismal liturgy is when we are asked, do you renounce the devil and all his empty promises? Because there is another name for empty promises, and that's downright lies. We Christians who follow the chain-breaking Jesus of Nazareth, we stand up and we renounce lies. So in closing, let me ask you something. Beloved of God, do you renounce the accuser and all his lies and empty promises? If so, say, I renounce them. Do you renounce the lies of white supremacy and its demonic legacy in this country and at this moment at our borders? Do you renounce the lies that if you get a B in chemistry, it means you are suddenly consigned to a grim future? Do you renounce the lies that your body isn't already perfect and made in God's image? Do you renounce the lies that only able-bodied people are worthy of taking up room on this planet? Do you renounce the lies that try and convince you that your current reality is your ultimate reality? Do you renounce the lie that queerness is anything other than beauty? Do you renounce the lies that tell you that grace isn't real, that there is even one thing God can't redeem? Well, me too. Amen.